I didn't understand it in that exact second, but the moment my husband stood still while another woman humiliated me in front of our children, something inside me quietly shut off. Not broke, not shattered, just clicked into a different mode. The kind you don't come back from. It was a Sunday evening, late fall, the kind where the air already smells like winter and people pretend warmth exists just because there's wine and background music. Our living room was full. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, and me standing there realizing I had been standing in the wrong place in my own life for a very long time. Let me rewind a bit because this didn't start with that moment. It never does. It started years earlier when I learned that being quiet made people underestimate you, and sometimes that felt safer than correcting them. My name is Claire Monroe, or at least that's the name I use now. Back then I was just Evan's wife. The calm one, the supportive one, the one who didn't really get business. People said it with a smile like it was harmless. Evan said it like it was fact. Evan Monroe was the kind of man who filled rooms easily. Tall, confident, great smile. He spoke in declarations, not questions. He loved telling the story of how he built his company from nothing, how pressure forged him, how most people cracked under responsibility. And I stood half a step behind him, holding a glass. I never finished, nodding at the right moments, smiling when people turned toward me with polite curiosity. To them, I was decoration. To him, I was proof that his life was balanced. The truth was, I noticed everything. I noticed how he skimmed contracts, how he trusted praise more than details, how he liked the image of leadership more than the weight of it. I also noticed how he stopped asking my opinion once his confidence hardened into something sharper. But I didn't push. I thought silence was support. I thought love meant not challenging ego. That silence followed me into every room, including the night everything changed. That evening, Evan had insisted on hosting. Said it was good for optics, good for relationships. A few people from his company were there, including a consultant named Lila Hart. She was younger, precise, always dressed like she expected to be seen. She laughed easily at Evan's jokes. She stood close to him, angled her body toward his, mirrored his confidence. I clocked it immediately the way women do. But I told myself I was imagining things. You know how that goes. At some point, Evan raised his glass and launched into one of his stories, the one about rescuing the company during a tough quarter. He talked about pressure, about sacrifice, about how leadership meant making hard calls while other people stayed comfortable. Then he laughed and said Claire wouldn't understand that part. She's never really been in the trenches. A few people chuckled, polite, safe. I felt the heat rise in my chest, then fade. I'd learned how to do that. I was about to step away to check on the kids when Lila smiled and said, "Some people just aren't built for certain rooms." Her eyes didn't leave mine. Before I could respond, before anyone could redirect the moment, she stepped forward and slapped me. It wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate, sharp. The sound cut through the room and everything went quiet in a way that felt unreal. I tasted blood. I remember that clearly. I remember my son screaming, my daughter dropping a toy. I remember dropping to my knees and pulling them into my arms, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might black out. And Evan stood there, watching. Someone said his name. Someone else muttered, "Hey, come on." Evan lifted a hand not to protect me but to stop the room from intervening. Then he looked down at me and said, calm, almost annoyed, "You brought this on yourself. You're always making things uncomfortable." That was the moment. Not the slap, not the humiliation. That sentence. Because in that sentence I realized something important. I wasn't safe. And if I wasn't safe, my children weren't either. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I asked someone to take the kids upstairs. My voice didn't shake. Inside, something had gone very still. Later that night, after everyone left and Evan shut himself into the guest room, I sat on the floor beside my kids' beds and made a decision. I would leave. Not dramatically, not loudly, with a plan. What Evan never understood was that my quiet had never meant I lacked power. It meant I didn't waste it. Years before I met him, my mother had taught me how to read financial language like a second dialect. She had built a regional investment firm from the ground up. She taught me about trusts, ownership structures, contingency planning. When she passed, she left me controlling interest in several holdings, including the parent company that later acquired Evan's firm. The structure was intentional. Quiet, legal, clean. When Evan was hired, he was an employee, a talented one. Nothing more. When we married, I didn't correct his assumptions. I thought love meant letting him shine. I thought silence was kindness. Instead, it became camouflage. After I left that night, Evan told his version loudly, that I was unstable, emotional, that I didn't understand pressure. He didn't mention the slap. He didn't mention the kids. People filled in the gaps with what made them comfortable. I didn't respond. I documented. I met with a lawyer, then an accountant, then another. Transfers that didn't make sense. Consulting fees routed to shell entities. Expenses labeled as development that funded weekends away. Patterns emerged. Emails, messages, and then the video. Someone had filmed the slap. Shaky, awful, real. Weeks later, Evan walked into work thinking the storm had passed. Expansion proposal in hand. Confidence intact. He didn't notice his access badge blinking red. He didn't notice the meeting agenda had changed. Inside the boardroom, I took a seat he didn't know was mine. I presented facts. Ownership. Misuse of funds. Breach of duty. The video. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I let the truth do what truth does when it finally gets air. The vote was unanimous. Evan was terminated effective immediately. Restitution pending. Legal review ongoing. The divorce followed quietly. Custody went to me. Supervised visits, therapy requirements, boundaries that no one could talk around. Lila disappeared as quickly as she'd appeared. No loyalty, no apology, just distance. My life got smaller. A modest place, fewer rooms, less noise, but the air felt different. My kids slept through the night. They laughed without checking faces first. One night my daughter said, "Mom, you're not quiet like before." I smiled and said, "I'm still quiet, just not invisible." Here's the part people argue about. Some say I waited too long. Some say I should have spoken sooner. Some say silence enabled him. Others say I played it smart. Maybe they're all right. Maybe they're all wrong. What I know is this. Silence can be surrender, or it can be strategy. The difference is whether you're choosing it. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, told you didn't belong in the room, I want to hear from you. Was silence your shield or your cage? Where do you draw the line between patience and permission? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And trust me, conversations like this matter more than people like to admit.